Oh my f***ing god. That was the sound. Creepy. And I'm never coming back to this cave again. Thanks for having me. See you later.
Go away.
Said go away.
Camping is meant to be an escape from the chaos of everyday life, a chance to sit under the stars, breathe in the fresh air, and feel at peace with nature. But when night falls and the silence grows too thick, when the shadows stretch just a little too far, that peaceful escape can quickly turn into something else, something darker. Not everyone who ventures into the wilderness returns with fond memories. Some return shaken, haunted by things they cannot explain. Others never return at all. Exploring with Fighters was never a camping enthusiast. He built his reputation exploring abandoned buildings, forgotten tunnels, and places shrouded in mystery. His adventures were filled with eerie encounters, unexplained phenomena, and brushes with the unknown. But nothing had prepared him for what happened in Epping Forest, a place infamous for its ghost stories, its unsettling history, and the chilling encounters reported by those who dared to enter after dark. That night began like any other investigation, filled with excitement and the thrill of exploration. Under the eerie glow of a full moon, he and his team set out, driving deeper into the forest. The road ahead was lined with towering trees, their branches twisting in the wind like skeletal fingers. The deeper they went, the heavier the air seemed to become, thick with something unspoken. Then the first sign that something was wrong. His car, a machine that had never given him trouble before, began to act strangely. A small issue maybe, just an unlucky coincidence. But when dealing with the unknown, small things often carry larger meanings. If this was a warning, they didn't recognize it. Not yet. They drove on, searching for a place to set up camp. Eventually, they found themselves beside an old abandoned church. Its stone walls were worn by time, its windows dark and empty, a relic of the past, standing quietly beneath the night sky. If there was ever a place to feel uneasy, this was it. The forest loomed beyond, stretching into pure blackness, an abyss where the light of the moon barely reached. The moment they stepped out of the car, a deep, unnatural silence settled around them. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant sounds of wildlife, just an oppressive stillness, pressing down from every direction. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, that makes you feel like something is listening, watching, waiting. Despite the unease creeping in, they pressed forward, setting up the tent, gathering firewood, trying to ignore the feeling that they were being observed. But that sensation never faded. It only grew stronger, heavier, as if something unseen lurked just beyond the trees, hidden in the darkness. As the night deepened, the forest changed. The usual sounds of nocturnal life faded into nothing. The distant calls of animals stopped. Even the wind seemed to disappear. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Then came the sound.
Why is the frame getting bigger? Don't know. What? What's that shadow? Is that you? Oh my... Stop. You can't see it on this camera, there's a shadow.
A single sharp crack echoed through the trees. A footstep, unmistakable, snapping a twig under its weight. They froze. The mind races in moments like this, searching for logical explanations. Maybe it was an animal, a deer, a fox, something harmless. But that excuse didn't sit right. The sound had weight, purpose, as if someone, or something, was carefully stepping closer. Then, without warning, something struck the tent. A sudden, forceful impact, sending a ripple of fear through the group. The air inside felt electric, charged with something unseen, something heavy. They didn't move, didn't speak, just listened, hearts pounding, breaths held, waiting for whatever came next. Hours later, when they reviewed their security footage, they found something they wished they hadn't. A figure, silent, motionless, standing just beyond the firelight, watching them, a dark silhouette against the trees. And the most terrifying part? The moment one of them finally peered outside, the figure moved. It didn't walk away. It didn't turn and leave. It darted, fast, unnatural, vanishing into the forest before they could get a clear look.
I hope the audio caught it. Holy shit. And then it sounded like someone went, but there is no one out here.
They weren't alone out there. The night stretched on, the fear settling in deeper with every passing hour. The noises continued, footsteps circling the tent, stopping, then starting again. Faint whispers carried on the still air, just far enough away that they couldn't make out the words, but close enough to know they were real. Then, another chilling moment. A flicker of light appearing from nowhere. One of their devices had switched on by itself. It had been buried in a pocket, untouched, yet somehow it activated. It didn't make sense. Fear turned into panic when, in the distance, the sharp crack of gunshots rang through the trees.
There's a light there. There. Where's that going? Shit, that's down in the forest. Not after that. That freaked me the hell out. That was next level. I wasn't expecting that.
Sounds sliced through the night, too close for comfort. Were they being hunted, chased, or was something out there trying to drive them away? Every shadow felt alive. Every movement in the corner of their vision sent chills through their spine. The feeling of being watched never went away. Despite every instinct telling them to run, they stayed. Trapped inside the tent, they listened. The footsteps continued, circling, pausing, then starting again. Hours passed, stretching endlessly. The silence in between was just as terrifying as the sounds themselves. And then, just before dawn, a final horror. The faintest noise, barely audible, yet impossible to ignore. Whispers, low, unintelligible, as though unseen figures were standing just outside the tent, murmuring to each other in voices not meant for human ears. Then, as the first light of morning crept over the horizon, it stopped. Cautiously, they emerged from the tent. The forest looked different in daylight, less menacing, more ordinary. But the fear remained. They searched for any sign of what had happened. Footprints, evidence of a visitor, something to prove what they had experienced. There was nothing, no tracks, no disturbances in the dirt, no evidence that anything, or anyone, had been there. It was as if the night itself had swallowed everything whole, leaving only the terror in their minds as proof. Epping Forest has long been known for its ghost stories, its legends of shadow figures and disembodied voices. Exploring with Fighter's experience was just another piece of its dark history, another tale added to the whispers of those who came before. But some questions will never be answered. Was it a stalker, a prank, a trick of the mind? Or was it something else entirely? Something not meant to be seen, something that lingers in the quiet places of the world, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitor. One thing is certain. After that night, he never went camping again. In 2021, Matt Field, a YouTuber known for his extreme outdoor adventures, embarked on a chilling journey that would haunt him for years to come. Renowned for his daring solo expeditions into some of the most remote and dangerous places, Matt had built a reputation for pushing boundaries. But nothing would prepare him for what awaited him deep inside a dark, desolate cave in Australia, an experience unlike anything he'd ever faced before. The cave, located in an isolated part of Australia, was shrouded in mystery. It had a disturbing reputation due to an unsettling encounter his friend had experienced there. After hearing his friend's account of strange noises and a feeling of being watched, Matt accepted a dare to spend the night in the cave alone, documenting the entire experience for his YouTube channel. As a seasoned explorer, Matt had faced countless dangers, but this was different. There was something ominous about the cave that made him uneasy from the start. Matt's journey began like any of his others, with excitement and anticipation. He hiked for hours into the wilderness, taking a minimalist approach. No water, just the bare essentials. After about 4 hours of exhausting travel, he reached the cave's entrance, hidden deep in the wilderness. The only way in was via a steep, man-made ladder, which added an unnerving sense of isolation. As Matt climbed down into the dark, he had no idea that the cave, which appeared calm and quiet, would soon reveal its sinister secrets. Once inside, Matt began to explore the cave's labyrinth of tunnels and narrow passageways. The deeper he went, the more unsettling it became. Strange sounds echoed around him. At first, it was the harmless sound of rocks falling, but then it escalated. There was something else moving in the darkness. Something that shouldn't have been there. At first, Matt dismissed it as wildlife. After all, caves often housed animals. But the longer he spent inside, the more it felt as though something was watching him. The quiet was suffocating. The kind of silence that presses in on you, making you feel smaller and more vulnerable. Around 11 p.m., as Matt sat down to eat his dinner, his usual baked beans, things took a terrifying turn. A loud, distinct noise echoed through the cave, the sound of a heavy chain rattling.
Oh my f***ing God. That was the sound.
It was the very same chain Matt had used to descend into the cave. There was no wind, no drafts, and the chain was far too thick and heavy to be affected by any natural forces. Yet, it rattled as if someone or something was playing with it. Matt froze, his skin prickling with a sudden rush of cold dread. His heart pounded as the realization hit him. He wasn't alone in this cave. Fear gripped Matt. The rational part of his mind screamed that there had to be an explanation. But deep down, he knew that something was horribly wrong. His voice trembled as he muttered to himself, "That's the sound." He grabbed his backpack, ready to leave, but something held him back. The thought of turning around and abandoning his adventure felt too sudden.
It's the third time it's happened now. And I'm almost about to abort mission. But I've got the only way up is that chain. Yeah, this is freaking me out a little bit.
He lingered near the entrance, hoping that the unnerving sounds would stop and the night would pass uneventfully. But the worst was yet to come. Just before 2 a.m., Matt heard a chilling noise, a soft, hissing sound that seemed to whisper in the darkness. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a wind draft. It was the sound of a voice, low, unintelligible, and undeniably human. Matt's breath caught in his throat. He stood frozen, straining to hear, hoping it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But the hissing continued, growing louder and more distinct. Unable to ignore it any longer, Matt ventured deeper into the cave, searching for the source of the disturbing noise. But there was nothing. No person. No animal. Just the echoes of his own footsteps. The cave's atmosphere had become suffocating. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as the sensation of being watched intensified. He couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was lurking just out of sight. Every creak of the cave, every distant sound, made him feel smaller and more exposed. The silence between the strange noises was worse than the sounds themselves. It was as if the cave was holding its breath, waiting. Despite the terror creeping into his bones, Matt stayed put, convinced that daylight would bring safety. But the hours dragged on, each minute filled with increasing dread. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every noise was a warning. The cave, once an exciting challenge, now felt like a prison. Matt couldn't ignore the sense that something was lurking in the shadows, watching him, waiting for him to let his guard down. When the first light of dawn finally touched the cave's entrance, Matt wasted no time. He gathered his things in a hurry, his heart pounding with relief as he stepped out into the daylight. The nightmare of the night was over, but the memories of those eerie sounds, the rattling chain, the hissing whispers, would stay with him forever. Matt swore never to return to that cave.
Creepy. And I'm never coming back to this cave again. Thanks for having me. See you later.
The fear he had experienced was unlike anything he had ever felt before. While he had faced wild animals, harsh conditions, and extreme danger in the past, this was different. The unsettling presence in that cave had left a mark on him that no adventure could erase. The fear he felt wasn't just a reaction to the unknown. It was something primal, as if the cave itself was alive with malevolent energy. The video documenting his terrifying ordeal became one of his most popular uploads. Viewers were captivated by the raw fear in Matt's voice and the haunting atmosphere of the cave. It was a stark reminder of how the wilderness can hold secrets far darker than anyone expects. For Matt, the cave was no longer just a place of exploration. It was a symbol of the dangers that lie in wait, hidden in the shadows, just out of reach. And for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to venture too deep, the cave would always be there, waiting. Camping alone in the wilderness can be an incredible experience. Just you, the crackling fire, and the endless sky stretching above. But when the sun sinks below the horizon and the world falls silent, that's when the real unease begins. Because out there, in the darkness, you never truly know what the people you meet can do to you. For Grizzly Gaz, a seasoned camper and outdoor enthusiast, unsettling encounters in the wild weren't exactly new. He'd spent countless nights under the stars, hearing strange noises in the dark, brushing off the eerie sensation of being watched, and chalking it all up to the usual nerves that come with being alone in the middle of nowhere. But one night, one seemingly normal trip into the woods left him shaken in a way he had never experienced before. It was the kind of night that sticks with you, the kind that leaves you questioning everything long after it's over. It started like any other camping trip. Gaz had chosen a remote spot deep in the forest, far from any roads, trails, or signs of civilization. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and damp earth filling his lungs as he set up his campsite. His tent was pitched, the fire was roaring, and he was ready to settle in for what he expected to be a peaceful evening. As the sun dipped below the trees, he started cooking his dinner, steak and mashed potatoes sizzling over the fire. The only sounds around him were the crackling flames and the distant chirping of crickets. It was perfect. And then he felt it. That unmistakable sensation, a presence. Someone or something was nearby. He turned sharply, heart pounding, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. And that's when he saw him. A man stood at the edge of his campsite, just standing there, silent, unmoving. Gaz's breath caught in his throat as the figure slowly stepped closer, his face coming into view in the flickering glow of the fire. He was rough-looking, his clothes dirty and disheveled, his expression unreadable. And then in a calm, almost too casual voice, he asked for a light. Just a cigarette, nothing more. Gaz hesitated. Something about this felt wrong. He had encountered hikers, hunters, and even drifters before while camping, but this man's approach had been completely silent. No crunch of leaves, no snapping twigs. Just the feeling of being watched. And then suddenly, he was just there. Despite his unease, Gaz forced himself to stay calm. He handed the man a lighter. The stranger introduced himself as Martin, claiming to be passing through. His voice was soft, almost too quiet. There was something about his presence that sent shivers down Gaz's spine. Not in what he said, but in how he said it. It was like he was measuring his words, choosing them too carefully, like he wasn't revealing everything. Against his better judgment, Gaz did what any decent person would do. He offered Martin a place by the fire, some food and conversation. They talked for a while. Martin shared bits and pieces of his past, struggles with addiction, aimless wandering.
Fed him, talking about life and how he got to where he is and drugs and whatnot.
But the whole time, Gaz couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Martin barely blinked. He barely moved, just sat there watching. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, Martin was gone. No goodbye, no sound of footsteps, just gone. Gaz turned his head for just a moment, maybe to check on the fire, maybe just to look away from those unsettling eyes. And when he looked back, Martin was walking away, disappearing into the blackness of the woods. It was like he had been waiting for the perfect moment to leave. Gaz called out instinctively, more out of reflex than anything else. A quick, casual, "See you later." And then, from the darkness, came Martin's slow, eerie reply, Yeah, see ya." A shiver crawled up Gaz's spine. The more he thought about it, the stranger the whole encounter seemed. Why had Martin left so suddenly? Why had he approached so quietly in the first place? And most importantly, was he really gone? The forest was silent, too silent. The fire crackled, but beyond that, nothing. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves, just pure, deafening stillness. Even after Martin had disappeared into the woods, the uneasy feeling did not fade. If anything, it grew stronger. Gaz felt it deep in his gut. Something was still out there, watching, waiting. Hours passed. He forced himself into his tent, but sleep did not come easily. Every single noise outside made his heart pound. The occasional snap of a twig, the whisper of wind through the trees. Then, something new. A noise, faint but deliberate. Soft footsteps, circling the perimeter of his campsite. He held his breath, frozen in place. Was it Martin? Had he come back? He gripped the knife he kept by his sleeping bag, heart racing, every muscle in his body tensed, but the footsteps never came closer. Just pacing, lurking. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The silence returned. Morning finally arrived, but the feeling of dread remained heavy in his chest. Gaz stepped out of his tent cautiously, scanning the area, looking for any sign that someone or something had been near his camp while he slept. And then, he noticed something. Something was missing. His trail camera, the one he had mounted on a tree the night before. Gone. Vanished without a trace.
Trail camera's gone. That's where it was, on this tree.
A cold realization settled over him. Martin had come back. Had he just stolen the camera? The thought made his skin crawl. Despite searching the area, there was no trace of Martin. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. It was as if the forest itself had erased all evidence. As Gaz packed up his gear, one thought kept running through his mind. Martin hadn't been just a passerby. He had been waiting, lurking, and maybe, just maybe, he was still out there for Grizzly Gaz. This wasn't just another eerie night in the woods. This was real. A stranger had appeared, vanished, and then returned, silently, unnoticed, to take something from him. And the worst part? He had no idea why. Was Martin truly just a lost person, wandering the woods? Or was he something much more sinister? Gaz would never know. And maybe that was the most disturbing part of all.